live. I know we're live. I'm not live on the screen. Hey Terry, I see you here. You're the first one here. How are you doing? Having our this Friday. Hi Bob. This Friday is going to be Cigar and Beer Friday. And I don't know if you can even have a cigar on a live stream or not, so maybe I'll put it away. But until we get here going, I don't even see. Am I going?
Yeah, I don't see you going either. I just rebooted to see if it would. There you are. Yeah, now you are.
Now we are. Let's see.
Yeah. I don't know what happened, but yes.
I'm still black screen, but it doesn't matter because y'all are here. And I even look fuzzy on my screen. We're fuzzy on y'all's screen. Did I touch?
I think it's the smoke.
It's the smoke. We're going to stop the smoke. Terry's here.
Scott's here.
Scott's here. Is anybody else see me fuzzy? Should I wipe the screen? Oh, I think I see myself clear. I don't know.
You're
I think
good.
we're good. We're good.
Oh, no, I'm partial.
Okay, Terry. Yep, we're going. We're done. We're on. And I don't know, but I'm going to enjoy one more little hit. All right. Everybody's in the room. Cold beer. Tasty cigar. Good friends. It's officially Pachanga Friday. It is now officially Pachanga Friday. Alrighty then. Okay, what are we going to talk about today? Does anybody have an idea?
Scott says a couple of more sips and it will clear right up.
There you go. And I think you're right.
In the absence of any questions, I think what you discussed earlier was wanting to touch on lifters.
Yes. Had some lifter questions. There's people that reach out and ask me questions. I try to answer when I get a chance. I don't necessarily check all my messages every single day. And then a lot of times I'll read it in the early morning as I'm getting prep for the day, have it in my mind, and I just don't get to the answer. So a lot of times I'll think of it, you know what, when we come on live, and sometimes I'll say I'll talk about it this Friday. One of the questions on lifters was that the plunger would not squeeze down, and then he bought another set of lifters, and those wouldn't squeeze down as well. So I asked, what type of animal are we talking about? So I thought it'd be a real good idea to talk about lifters, lifter preload, valve adjustment, but it's Friday, and y'all can decide what we're going to talk about. Here where we're at in the Texas Hill Country, it's also, hey Lewis, it's also Friday. There's swap meets going on. The Roundup is going on.
Fiesta started. For those who have been around here, you know what Fiesta means to this area.
So yes, Fiesta has started. The swap meet in New Braunfels, which is a big swap meet. The swap meet at the Roundup, which is by Austin, outside of Austin, and we're here at work. So, and we're probably going to be here at work all weekend as well. But that doesn't matter. It's festive here. Right now I'm looking outside and it's beautiful sunny weather. It stormed last night. We came in. I spent half the morning cleaning up water from inside the shop. We had a downpour, I guess, because there was water everywhere. And then cleaned up all the engines. Had one, we don't want to get into it. It's water everywhere, rust everywhere.
Hey, but we didn't have a tornado like they did just a couple of miles further over, so.
Yes, a couple of miles from here at Canyon Lake, there was a tornado. So, but everyone's...
And golf ball size hail in New Braunfels.
Yeah, and golf ball size hail in New Braunfels. And for the Roundup, they've had some bad... they had to postpone a while back, years ago, because of COVID and all kind. And then I remember it was cold and wet. They just had this bad luck. And then here it is, like, the parties actually started around here. They start the week before. So everybody starts coming in, and they start having all kinds of private, Roundup parties. But all that being said, it's been said.
That's funny. All that being said, it's been said.
I don't know. So anyway, and if nobody wants to hear about lifter preloader, that's there. If the person that's not here yet that asked about the question, it's a hard one to answer because I didn't have any info on what type of vehicle. On a hydraulic lifter, if you buy a brand new one, or hydraulic lifter, the plunger or the piston, it depends on what type of vehicle, but they're all going to have the same kind of mechanics on the inside, is soft and spongy when it has no oil in it. Once there's oil in it, the little check valve closes and it becomes a solid. So a hydraulic, really, it's just a automatic adjustable lifter. That's what it is. But when it's operating, it actually operates like a solid. Why? And the reason is that if somebody cares or doesn't care, I'm talking to myself or by myself. I'm not talking about myself, but it's that it's self-adjusting. You cannot compress a liquid. We've discussed this many, many times. No matter what you try to do, you're not going to compress a liquid. So what the check valve inside of a hydraulic lifter does is the oil pressure pushes the little piston up, makes zero lash, so you don't hear no noise. But
Any
when
noise.
any noise, you don't hear any noise. As the cam tries to open the valve, it's moving so fast that it becomes a solid lifter. You can't compress the liquid, so it opens the valve. If you were to hold that valve open for a while, especially in the older cars that have bigger springs, a Chevy 350, a Ford 302, a big block Chevy, any of the older vehicles, you can sit there and watch the rocker just sit there and start to bleed the oil out of the lifter. Just pull the valve cover off, turn the motor over, and you'll see the rocker just bleeding the oil out of the lifters. When it's running, it's moving too fast and it cannot bleed the oil out of the lifter. So what you have is a zero lash. It opens, if it's a 480 lift cam, it opens 480 lift. And because, like I said, you cannot compress a liquid, it's moving too fast. Does that make any sense for everybody as opposed to...
It does make a lot of sense to it.
All right. So, tick, 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 yes. If, like last Friday, we discussed someone was having an issues, and they actually called back on Monday, talked to Shop Mom, and they were having lifter ticking. And there's not a lot of stuff that, mechanic in a can. You buy, you don't maintenance your vehicle right, and there's going to be something you can buy that you pour in that's a mechanic in a can that's going to fix all your problems because you didn't want to do any maintenance. A lot of those are snake oil, but there are a few that really do work in certain instances. I believe by just what he was saying that we had a lot of varnish in the lifter. As I said, the little piston inside, it moves. When you get oil pressure underneath it and the little spring, it gets pushed up against the cam and it adjusts itself. After running there for a long time, it's adjusted. The varnish that's all over all the parts gets in that lifter, and it actually locks that little piston inside the lifter, and it makes it into a solid lifter because it just locks it in place. So it is no longer self-adjusting. After a while, you get some wear, you start hearing some ticking, even though it's a hydraulic lifter. The first assumption, hydraulic lifters ticking, I don't have the right amount of oil pressure because it cannot work without oil pressure. But if the oil pressure is right, everything's good and it's ticking, it's probably just varnished up. A good thing to do is the lifter quiet. It's a solvent basically that just eats all of the varnish that's everywhere, and a Italian tune-up. If Tommy was here, I don't know if Tom is here in the room or not. Terry might understand this. Some of y'all, not only people that are in the military would understand this, but the Italian tune-up is to rev the bejeebas out of an engine, and it gets rid of all of the varnish. And they don't get rid of the varnish because that doesn't necessarily get rid of varnish, but it slams all the components, high RPM to bust off all the stuff, and it's like a fresh tune-up. It's called an Italian tune-up. So Italian tune-up, if someone says, hey, I'll do an Italian tune-up on your car, you might want to say no, because they're going to over-rev the bejeebas out of it to loosen up all the parts, and it's like a fresh engine again. In the sense of the valve train, that would help it. I use that in it to loosen up the varnish, and then I rev the bejeebas out of it, and it'll take care of it. It will. If that doesn't do it, there ain't nothing going to do it. When we do a valve job, I'm doing a set of V8 Chryslers right now. As part of this service, we bleed all the lifters. While I'm bleeding all the lifters, if any of them stick, there you go. That one did not come back. If you can squeeze the lifter, bleed the oil out of it, and the piston pops right back up again, no varnish, we're good to go. If the lifter, you squeeze it, stays stuck, that's what's happening in the engine. And that's why you got to do this. Some lifters, hydraulic even, you can take apart. A lot of the older hydraulic lifters, you most definitely can. Volvo and there's some other bucket style lifters that are hydraulic that you can actually tap the lifter. I have on the vise, the back part of the vise, you can tap the lifter real hard and the inside guts will come out of it. And you can clean and devarnish the lifters that way. Enough said about lifters and varnish, right? I don't know.
Well, Lewis did ask if you use a special lube on lifters during assembly.
Yes, most definitely. We've been here for 10 years, and it's our 10-year anniversary, and we've never lost a cam. It's not by luck. And for the most part, it's a lot of luck if you don't flatten the cam out these days, but really has nothing to do with luck. It happens to be with not chancing anything. Back in the day, you didn't have to do a cam break-in. You literally did not have to do a cam break-in. Now, if you don't do a cam break-in, you'll get a flat cam within 30 minutes. You'll start to flatten the cam or get the wear patterns of a flat cam by turning the engine over too much before you fire it for the first time. It already starts to wear the lifter and the cam. So this is what we're going to use. We're going to use Gibbs, which is now driven assembly lube. It's like a grease. It's a moly phosphorus just grease. And I'll coat the complete cam, not the journals that spin, not that goes into the cam bearings. That I'll use either, depending, I'm going to use an Amsoil, I'm going to use an assembly lube, a Clevite assembly lube, Amsoil assembly lube, Lucas assembly lube. That really doesn't matter. 40 weight oil, 30 weight oil on where the cam bearings go. But where the lifters go, I put on a glove and I just sit there and I put a lot on the camshaft. This stuff, a bucket of it is pretty expensive. It doesn't matter. Not to me. I'll coat the whole thing. The distributor gear, you better coat it in grease as well. This isn't just wheel bearing grease. This is driven assembly lube. That's basically the little packets that come in the cams, little red. I'll pour that over the rockers, that's not going to do, Back in the day, when cams didn't go flat, that little red packet of assembly lube was perfectly fine. Now we have all these issues. Let's fast forward to today, and yet they still give you the little pack of little lube. Isky gives you a little tub of that assembly grease. You get what you pay for. You want I'm not going to even use Comcam, but you want anybody's, cams, and then people are always want to compare products by price. You get what you pay for. So you compare your product by price. Well, this one had the best price. They all do the same. Well, I fall for that. I used to always buy the cheapest I could and just think, if it goes bad, I'll buy another one. After being with Shop Mom, it's in Spanish. Lo barato costa mucho.
Lo barato sale caro.
Lo barato sale caro. So that's Spanish for the cheap cost a lot. So so buy a better quality product and don't have to replace it often. That's why there's no really a place for a flat tappet cam anymore. The only place there's a place for a flat tappet cam, that's old school hydraulic or solid. It's called flat tappet. If it has a lifter that rides on the cam, is when you don't have a choice. An example, a Flathead Ford, there isn't a roller cam available for the Flathead Ford. We did build a Flathead Ford Bonneville car that he spent an ungodly amount of money to have a roller setup done for the car, and before he brought the engine to us, and it blew up on one of the runs. It actually would have broken the record, but you got to do it twice. And on the second run, it grenaded. So when we went to go, now he brought it to us to find out what the problem was and to fix the problem. I actually was on board with, with the roller setup. I'm like, that's awesome. You cannot use a hydraulic anything on a flathead because there is no oil pressure to the lifters. But I didn't get to see some of the grenaded parts on the cam part. And then they decided they weren't going to use that type of setup anymore. Anyway, what else do we have?
There was another question a little bit ago from Adrian. Why do 3.6 liter Chrysler and Chevy engines why are they so unreliable and crack the cylinder heads?
All of the lightweight stuff, and I shouldn't say all because I can tell you right now, Hondas and Toyotas don't do it. But especially a lot of the manufacturers have gone to lighter castings. Yes, we want to save weight, but these heads are aluminum anyway. And what I will say about a lot of the problems on these late model engines that are kind of throwaway engines. They were made to be used for a certain amount of time, and then they were made to be removed as a unit. Back in the day, and it wasn't even that long ago. Back in the day, we remember the manufacturers were, talking and working on a replacement unit. They were calling it a unit because you would drop the cradle, and their theory was that you'd have another engine transmission unit there, and in a day, you could do a service tech could do 4 of them, 2 in a day, and they could drop a unit out, pull a unit out, send it to get reserviced, put another unit in, and be on the way. They weren't going to be working on. That was the theory. Is they're not going to be working on engines per se inside of them. They were going to replace the unit. So an example is the Ford Edge. Great engine, V6, tons of power, coils on cams, and all the great, variable cam timing, all these great technologies. Ford decided to put the water pump inside the engine. That is right, inside of the engine, and it's driven by the chain. They got rid of a belt because they wanted to do a long service unit. I'm going to call it a unit because back in the day, that's what they were all going to do. That's not what they're calling them now, and I don't know if they're still by that mentality, but this engine has the water pump built into it. It doesn't use a timing belt, so there's no service revolved there. There's no service on the water pump. It's an unserviceable item. That's why when the engine is there, the first thing they do is put the water pump on, and then they start putting all the chains and the tensioners and everything else on. It's like the first thing on the front of the engine before the timing. It's one of the first things. And I was like, why would they do that? Why? It makes no sense. And it kind of doesn't make any sense because we had to do one for our son's car. Actually, he did it. I just helped. Drank some beer, and we used the shop at home. You may have seen some of these ordeals that we've been messing with at home. But here's the deal. That engine has over 200 and some thousand miles on it, and very little maintenance that this thing ever even needed. I think it's a coil pack, and just very little maintenance. This thing is just meant to go on and go on. It went so long at 200 and whatever miles in it, the water pump did finally fail, and that actually failed and took out just about everything. The point being is, if you replace the unit out at 200,000 miles, the new unit, the new engine comes with the new water pump. And once again, why would a water pump not be serviceable? I was like furious. What idiot thought of this non-service? In other words, the water pump is a non-serviceable item. Well, it lasted over 200,000 miles. So now everything else is so robust on this engine that if they would have made the water pump a little more serviceable, we could have put a water pump on it and kept going. The problem we had was it dumped tons of water. The water pump being inside the engine does not leak with the weep hole outside. Ford did, because I was like, why in the world would they not have put a weep hole so that you can see water dripping when the water pump starts going out? Well, Ford did. After we pulled it apart, pulled the timing cover, and pulled everything else, I was just feared, like, what idiots? What you fire a guy that has 40 years of experience, designers, tech, all these guys, and you put in these college kids because they're cheaper. I can hire 4 of these engineers out of college and get rid of the one guy who's been here forever and knows everything. And I was like, these idiots. You know what? Well, after we pulled it apart, we find out that Ford did put a little hole over to drip outside the block. Here it is. You ready for this? They put it right next to the AC compressor. What does an AC compressor do? I know that the condenser, the evaporator inside drips water, but an AC, if it's working properly, the low side sweats and you drip water off the AC. When a car's sitting there idling and you see water dripping off the bottom, it's not a coolant leak. I'm not saying if water's dripping on yours, don't haul butt saying Danny said it's not a coolant leak. Could be, but for the most part, ACs in Texas, it's hot. You run your AC, you put a lot of water out. It just makes a lot of water. So, not knowing where Ford put the weep hole, not knowing Ford even had a weep hole, not everything else, we know now if you get some dripping and it's clear water and it's condensation, or it wouldn't even be clear on this one, but and it's right by the AC compressor, that's where Ford put the drain. Here's the block, here's the drain up high, and here's the AC compressor. So it pretty much right in between the AC compressor and the block, because the AC compressor mounts to the block and the timing cover. So we know now. So 400,000 miles now, when this thing gets put back together again, we'll be looking for any kind of drips by the AC compressor. So back to the question of why do they make? They do last in a perfect environment. In a perfect environment, I guarantee you, they tested this in a lab in a perfectly environment, and it does work. Here's the differences. We don't live in Milwaukee, we live in Texas. Here, 100-degree day is just an average day. Here, to 281 traffic, you may be at a light at 108-degree day or whatever. It's a different environment where we live here. And here, if anything starts to affect the temperature, it can easily get to past too hot. Back in the day, if our coolant temperature was 210 degrees, that's when it was red, pull over, you're done. All modern cars now, the thermostat will bring the coolant temperature up to 200 degrees. That's where it starts his life. If I've tried, I don't know if I've tried on the PT Cruiser to modify the thermostat so that it's open sooner, because that was one of the problems with the PT Cruiser. Another one of those throwaway vehicles. Everything's real thin, and everything's plastic under the hood. So any kind of overheating, it just melts and warps everything. The heads are real thin castings. They warp. That's when you blow a head gasket. The head gasket would have never blown under regular operating conditions. So that's the thing. If it never overheats, but it cannot take any kind of overheating at all. So back in the day, like I said, we saw steam. Oh my God, no one ever looked at their gauges. You know what I'm talking about. Saw steam, the engine starts to run rough. Then you look down at your gauges. Oh, the light's on or whatever. Then you pull over, you let it cool, you get it towed, you replace the water hose or the water pump, and you're good to go. That ain't happening these days. So on another subject, but it's the same subject, is we just got a BMW, man. This thing is a crazy beast of a thing, engine, humongous. I just love this thing already. I just got it, and of course I haven't started working on it yet. Just started to diagnosing. I want to do a TikTok, YouTube, whatever, Instagram, Facebook, Reels, and all of that with the song. The country western song, "Every Light in the House Is On." Oh, that dash is like a Christmas tree. There's lights that are flashing. There's lights that are on. They got little pictures of oil cans, pictures of this, and where the radio goes. It's a data logging thing that just, there's more lights on. I had to buy a scanner just to be able to read these things. I couldn't even change the battery. Point being is, thank you eBay. I got my the valve cover on BMWs are plastic, so you can buy a valve cover gasket. Buy the valve cover. That's why they cost $1,000 when you go to the dealer to get a valve cover done, because they're going to replace the unit, the valve cover, not. So I almost bought an aftermarket aluminum valve cover, so we don't have no more of this problem. But this thing, when I drove it home, which is only about 2 blocks, there was smoke bellowing out of everywhere. It was just, I thought this car was on fire. Then I smelled it. It smelled like burnt oil, but leaking everywhere. Back to the point, they don't make stuff to handle any kind of heat. So this thing has more oil leaks, more leaks, vacuum leaks, and everything under the hood is plastic, and including the valve cover, including the intake manifold. Not too long ago, they went to all plastic vacuum hoses. Y'all know if y'all work on anything. So that's been a while back. Everything is all plastic, nylon, plastic, vacuum hoses that get brittle and break. So anyway, I'm talking way too much. Maybe I'm not talking enough.
There was actually first of all, there was a question earlier from Lewis Brooks about regrinding cams for vintage engines. I'd have to go back and find it. However, Sammy wants to know.
Hey, Sammy.
What was Enzo Ferrari's opinion of the JB Weld regular?
What would he think? I think he would be probably. I think he would have smiled. I think he probably, went like, bad, Ferraris are handmade. They're just, and could we have cut, and actually, no, I would never cut that much on the cylinder head. You'd have to go back and look at these videos. This Ferrari, I've been working this Ferrari for 2 weeks. it's complicated, but it's actually real simple. But it's just a lot of repetitiveness. I mean, there's 4 valves per cylinder. You got 4 lifter buckets. You got 4 shim. You got 4 wafers. You got the springs, retainers, the keeper. Think of the keepers times 2 times all of these parts. There's tons of parts. They're just clean, 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 repeat, clean, repeat, clean. I like to lay everything out, and I like to keep everything organized. I like to keep, I'm putting the same buckets back in the same bore, but I'm cleaning the bucket, I'm glass beating the inside of the bucket, and then I'm polishing the outside of the bucket. So I think he would have loved that I used JB Weld on the deck. So here we go. JB Weld has a place. It is the best stuff since sliced bread. We've been using JB Weld. I don't care for the JB Quick. I'll use the JB Quick. What did I use here? The JB Quick. But there's a place for the JB Quick. The place for the JB Quick is when you don't have time to do it right. All right. So the head's on the mill. I'm milling. It has porosity. It has some pitting. Okay, we're not talking warped. We're not talking a blown head gasket between 2 cylinders. You have to go watch the pictures, the videos, or whatever. One of these days, I'm gonna be awesome where I can just click a button here and on the screen will come up the picture that we're talking about, and that could actually help for talking about stuff one of these days. So what has happened, it's a paper gasket. I'm gonna say paper, it's a composite, but just some people may not know what composite means, but you know what paper means. Pretty much everybody, pretty much. Some people may not know what paper is, but let's say it's a paper gasket. The sealing rings around the combustion chambers are still a metal sealing ring. Everything else is layered paper. So what has happened is throughout the years, this is an older Ferrari. It's sat, and a lot of old tractors, a lot of flatheads will have this. A lot of stuff that has a paper gasket. Coolant has seeped in paper. Paper will absorb coolant, and water or coolant has gotten into the layers of the head gasket and sat there and just ate into the aluminum. Okay, so now we got the head. I'm milling the head. I'm a particular of don't mill 1,000s more than you need to. Somebody commented you don't really need to set up a head within tenths of 1,000s. No, you don't need to. You don't need to. There's plenty of people that would just mill a head 10 right off the bat. They set it up with the level. The level's close. They set the machine to 10,000s. Whack 10,000s. They go, high five, everybody. We're high fiving. This head cleared on the first mill, and they get it out the door. I understand you're a production shop and you don't have all day long to sit there. I'll raise my mill head up. I'll put a dial indicator on the mill head. Come out after I use my level and got everything else, and then I'll probe. I'll put a dial indicator out and I'll probe the 4 corners. Where the head bolts go, the 4 corners of the head, I'll probe them. I'll write, if you see that the pictures, the videos that I have, there'll be a 0 on one corner. The lowest side is always going to be the 0, and then either plus 1/10, plus, if it's anything within 1,000, half a tenth, there's not much you can do. But even a tissue can be mic'd. So if I need, 5/10, I'm just that crazy that I'll loosen it up and put a 5/10 little shim underneath the head to get it back up. But I want all 4 corners to be 0. I want all 4 corners to be 0. The center is going to be bowed. I don't care what head you have. They're all going to warp something. These heads were perfect. It is not here for any overheating issues at all. Has it overheated at some time in its life? Possibly. But this head was really had about 2,000s. Very well. I put the cams in. When I disassembled, took everything apart, the cams spin. On one side of the cam, which is weird because normally it's the exhaust side, not the intake side. The exhaust generally warps more heat. On these Ferraris, for whatever reason, the intake side had a little more, and you could check it right across the center, perfectly straight, even the exhaust even better, and get to the intake side, and there was a slight little bow on the intake side. We're talking 1,500s, no more than 2. I put the cams in, they turn. I have them logged on my notes and on my wall. The intake cams spin, but I can just feel a little bit of tension on them. I'm going to polish the cams anyway. It's not an issue. Didn't need to be straightened by any means. We're talking, 1,000. The oil clearance is only about 1,500 on a camshaft anyway. So the little bit, like I said, I can spin it, but I could just feel the exhaust, man. I could just spin and feel no tension at all. So when I have it up on the mill. One of the other videos is me using a jack shaft underneath it. Stop it, people. And I actually loaded the bottom of the head, which would be the top of the head. It's upside down, and I actually bent the head 1/1000, 1.5 thousandths. So I was able to cut these Ferrari heads 3/1000ths. It's all it took from start to finish. And people are going to go, there's no way you can cut. A human hair is not mine anymore, but a human hair is about 4/1000ths thick. Depending on who you are, mine's probably about 2 now. But like I said, it doesn't make any sense. I just can't sleep at night. So it made sense for me. So the JB Weld that Lewis is talking about, once I do, what I usually do is I'll set up 0, 0, 0, 0. I'll lower my head on my machine. I'll put it at 0 or a tenth above 0. Right at the 0, I have a dial indicator on, and then I do what's called a skim cut. Like I said, if I do 0 and go across and I don't barely see anything, I may do a tenth or 2 and just do a skim cut. Why? Because that's the way my uncle would just, we're old school. We have to have the visual. I don't care all the data and the mic and everything else. I also want to use the analog eyes. So when I look at it, I can see, so that's when I noticed right across the center. I tweaked it just a hair, like I said, skimmed it. You can see all the bolt holes. Stop it, people. The bolt holes. And you can see how I touched them all at a tenth cut, just a 0 cut on the top. What I did notice is there was porosity on the deck from the coolant eating holes, probably just water, not even coolant or whatever, eating holes on the deck. Some of them were quite deep. They're not in the ceiling ring. They're not in anything. Shop Mom pulled out a Ferrari head from somebody's on the internet, and you can see where they mill the head, and they have these porosity spots, and they just have pitting all in there. It could go out and work. It's not in an area where it seals. There's not ever going to be any leak. But what is going to happen? Well, coolant, it's already not got porosity in there. So when you torque that head gasket, torque the head, it got water in it before when it was perfectly flat with no porosity. So eventually water's going to get back in there and eat things. Or you can do like other shops do. I saw this head that she pointed out, and they milled the tar out of them. You can still see those spots, but they weren't as bad as what they are, originally. So what I do, here's why I use the JB Quick. The head's been glass beaded already. It's perfectly clean. I mixed up some JB Weld, JB Quick in this instance. If I didn't need to keep moving on, I probably would have mixed up the old JB Weld and come back in the morning. I mixed up some JB Quick and put it with a razor blade, a brand new razor blade, put it on the deck and just skim the top, get rid of it all. So it's just in the holes. Come back an hour and a half later, mill the head. It's still up on the mill. It's still all zeroed. Cut 3/1000ths. It's beautiful. If you're a blind man like me, you can feel, and you can't even feel where any of this porosity is. I'm gonna have to put a picture of the after. When you look at it, it's not that bad at all. You see little dots here and there, and then you see these spots of round circles where it was pitted, but now they're flat. Put a brand new head gasket, torque it down. It's gonna seal perfectly. We're not gonna have any kind of water being able to get in there. So, and it's in between this surface. That's why JB Quick is okay for this instance. If it was something else exposed or another area, I would most definitely use the regular JB Weld. My uncle fixed the airplane, the big, huge airplanes. We have Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio. We're a military base in San Antonio. There's Lackland Air Force Base. There's Randolph Books. And one of these huge planes couldn't take off because their generator, they have this huge generator that they roll up to it to fire up the engines on the planes. It had a crack on the block. So they were down. They couldn't, I don't know if they're all down, whatever, but they called us, Chief. Hey, Chief, help. My uncle was known as Chief in San Antonio. What can you do? Is there any way you can weld that? What can you do? We all know that for the most part, 98% of the time you try to weld cast iron, unless you know what you're doing, unless you're an old timer, an 80 or 90-year-old guy who's been doing it forever, you're going to just crack it worse. You're just going to add to the problem. He V'd it out, put JB Weld. What he did is he took metal from the brake lathe and the boring bar, the metal shavings, mixed up JB Weld, poured metal shavings into it, V'd the block out, put it on the side of the block, strong as it could be, worked fine. That was a story that went on for a long time in San Antonio, how Chief fixed this big old thing that they just didn't know. And the military is pretty much, that's not the kind of stuff they do. And it's like, no, we're down and we got to order. So that's how he fixed it. I told this story at, may have been at SEMA one year. It may have been at one of the conventions. Maybe at SEMA. JB Well was there in a booth, and they were asking people for JB Well stories. So I told him this story about Chief and fixing this. And you know what the guy tells me? This is the owner of the company. The owner of the company. And I remember he had long hair. You couldn't think he was skinny, got long hair, and you couldn't think he didn't look like an owner of a company. But the owner of the company, he says, you know what that black in the JB Weld is? Which I did, but he says that's fine metal. That's metal that we grind to a fine powder. So what your uncle did by putting the metal shavings in there, that's what we use. The black is the fine powder, and then they use an epoxy, and the white is a hardener. But anyway, it works. You can use that JB Weld with metal. If you're ever doing something at home, you need something, go to a shop, anywhere where they're grinding metal, get you some of that metal shavings. When you mix it, once it cures, take a grinder to it, it's sparking. JB Weld is sparking away. You can manuflux JB Weld, when you got the metal shavings in it. But, okay. Did I talk too much about JB Weld? Thanks, Louis, for the JB Weld.
I'm not going to say you talked too much. However, you've missed several questions. I could go back. I don't even know where they are anymore. And Way Up Dude said, I should point out to you that shorter answers equals more questions.
Yes, okay. It's like Shaman says, keep my answers shorter and answer more questions. I'm on it. Cody James, we've never seen Cody James in the room before. Did you mean thermostat? I don't know, I'm missing a lot of stuff.
Yes.
We got a lot of people I've never seen before, so not the time to be overwhelmed in talking. I need to start listening to Shaman.
Cody James was wondering, is 150 degrees running temp too cold? And heat is horsepower, so.
Are you running on a fuel injection? I did this to this PT Cruiser because they have an inherent, the PT Cruiser, the front nose is real tight. There's not a lot of air. The radiator, you just get a couple of butterflies on your radiator and it overheats. So this is going to be grandson's car. So son and myself are working on it for grandson. I said, you know what? I'm going to do a little trick. Chief, all your old school ways, So I take the stat and I start spinning the spring in the stat, and I spring a coil out, and I take my little saw with a wheel, and I cut that coil off. It still opens and closes, but I've changed the opening, I've changed the spring rate, I've changed when it opens, and I even did a YouTube video, a little quick, shorter video, and I said, you know what, you can get as scientific as you want. You can sit there with some boiling water, dip it in there, cut a little bit of a spring off and see what it changes, and cut a little bit, see what it changes. I didn't care. I had the old stat. We had a brand new one right there. I got the old one. I said, no, I took one thing. Anyway, I did it. It worked. This thing was cool as all get out. Maiden voyage. Check engine light, check engine light, check engine light. Engine under threshold. So you don't want to really do it. If it's a personal car and you want to play with it a little bit, I could have manipulated. I went with one whole coil. It ran cooler. It just took care of the problem. I put a brand new radiator in anyway, brand new water pump, but this is Texas. And it never got warm enough. It never got warm enough in Texas. So to stop that check engine light, grandson gets the car and is like, oh my God, check engine light, you teach the kids, check engine light, stop. So it went back to the house. Next weekend, we pulled that out and put a brand new stat in it. I already had it. I was going to send it back to the warehouse and put it in, problem solved. And I just don't know, but anyway, if it's fuel injected, no, unless you have an aftermarket fuel injection that you can control the tune, don't worry about it. But anything fuel injected, you cannot mess with the coolant temperatures without turning on a check engine light. They have open and closed loop. If you know how fuel injections work, when you first start up an engine and it's cold, it has preset settings. They already know, give the timing this, give this much fuel, give this, give this, give this. That's cold. Okay, so it's open loop. It's not in a circuit. It's not reading any sensors. It's, it's just doing a set program tune that they have. Once it goes up to operating temperatures, it goes to closed loop. Closed loop means that now it's reading all the sensors and it's making educated guesses. I say educated, it's not the new, what is it, computers that think for you. I can't even think. AI. See, I'm not even AI.
You're
but
definitely not artificial.
I'm not artificial intelligence. I'm not, maybe I'm the A, just not the I don't know. But the thing is that these things is a tune that they've already come up with. So it's in a sense it's tuning as it goes. But the only reason it's tuning as it goes because they already put those numbers in there. They already put if the temperature is to 200, do this. If it's 201, do this. 205, do this. So it's not really, AI in the sense that it's on its own. It's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that because I already know how to fix things. It's primitive. It is on the fly self-tuning, but it's set parameters that somebody's already put in there. So when you manipulate the coolant temperature, no bueno on a fuel-injected car. That's not self-tuned or aftermarket tune. All right, did I miss something else going way too long? I tried to make it quicker, though. I did. I really did.
You really did. Adrian had one more question, which is why does the engine shake when misfire detonation pre-ignition happens? And this one I know you can do quickly.
Yes, because we're not firing the cylinders in their time. A pre-ignition or detonation actually is devastate. Actually, it's very, very volatile. It's one of the worst things that can happen. The piston is going up. Here's top dead center. Here's the crankshaft. As it goes up, it needs to clear the pivot point, the TP. It needs to get past that. Once it gets past that point, now we can push down, and it's going to push the crank around. If I'm still going up, and then I have combustion, no bueno. In a V8, I have 7 other cylinders that are still doing their thing, but generally we have, if it's a ping and a detonation because of fuel or load, it's multiplied, okay? So we want to make sure that the piston gets past top dead center, all the load and the combustion gases, the PSI that's pushing this piston down, it's doing work for you. It's pushing that the other side. If it's going up, this was going to happen. At the very least, if you were on a dyno or somewhere, you would see a drop in horsepower, really, really bad, because you're trying to brake the engine. It's going up, compressing all the gases, and then boom, it hadn't gone over the other side. You're going to probably break a ring gland. The most common thing is the top ring gland on a piston. When a engine comes apart or comes in and we take it apart and you pull the pistons out and rings fall or pieces of the ring gland fall, we know we had detonation. We had pre-ignition or detonation. So very, very bad, and that's why at the very least it's a loss in power. Now vehicles have knock sensors that can sense a knock before you can even let off the gas. It's that quick, and it can pull timing. So it'll pull timing out until the knocking goes away, and then it'll put timing back in. Phase Toyota has dual knock sensors. A lot of cars have, multi-knock sensors. GMLS, they have their knock sensors underneath the intake manifold. Where does water go? Anyway, we're not going to get there. They fixed that problem. Was that a little bit quicker?
That was a little bit quicker. And Craig White comments, I've been informed that the Ford Flathead V8 fitted in my Bren gun carrier all run extremely hot, and it was normal practice during the war to remove both thermostats to add coolant flow.
Okay, here's the deal. Yes and no. Yes and no. Well, it's actually good. It's not fuel injected, so you can do that. But do not remove the thermostats. We would, especially as kids, we just, something hot, bad, get rid of it. We're going to, make the car lighter. We took stuff off. That's what we did. You're a hot rodder. That's what the first thing you do is, what stuff can we take off? Okay? Here's the deal. On the Flathead Ford, you can get away with it. And that's why some things you cannot use from one engine to another, because they did it back in the day. And then, they did it back in the day, so I'm going to do it too. The Flathead Ford does run hot. And the difference in a Flathead Ford is they run dual cooling systems. It's a single radiator, but the left and the right bank of the engine has its own water pump, has its own water pump, its own cooling, upper and lower, goes into the engine separate. They're not connected together. They're connected together in the radiator. But that's a vehicle that runs at a lot slower RPM. So pulling the stats out, not a bad thing on a flathead Ford. I like to run, but you got to have restriction. You do that to a Chevy small block, do that to a Ford 302, do it to a Chrysler 318, 340, do it to any of the other engines, and you're actually going to run hotter. Unless you just have a bad overheating problem that fixed it. But here's the deal. You think, well, how am I going to pull the stats out and it's going to run hotter? Now I got water circulating. The stat's going to slow the water down. That's why it slows the water down. A stat will be closed and let the water just circulate in the block to let the engine temperature build up, so it warms up quicker. Once it warms up to temperature, if it's a 160 stat, 180 stat, 190. Let's say it's a 190 stat, it'll open at 190, but the temp on your gauge will generally go about 205 and then start coming down. So once it opens, it still goes up a little bit and then comes down. On any of the other engines that I talked about, Chevy, Ford, Chrysler, Buick, the engine turns too fast. So you're going down the road, you're going at 3,000 RPM. The water does not have time to extract the heat from the components. If you know anything about heat jumps to cold. Okay, so a hot product, as coolant is going by, water coolant, don't run water, run coolant, because actually you want to extract as much heat as you can. But as it's going by, the coolant is cooler than the block. The heat goes, hey, and it jumps over to the coolant. As the coolant gets through the radiator, air's going through it, right? Ambient air, which we don't like to do, but that's what everybody does, is air's going through the radiator. Air is cooler, even though it's a 100-degree day, it's cooler than 200-degree water. So all of the heat goes, I'll see you later, and it jumps over to to air, okay? So now the coolant can go back because it's now dropped in temperature. As it comes by the cylinders again, heat goes, hey, and it's a never-ending story. If it's moving too fast, heat can never jump over. It's like a train going by you. You're going to try to catch that train. Slow it down. A lot more people can get on. I'm not saying one or two guys, one or two of the little heat molecules didn't jump over, but not a lot. So you need to slow the coolant down to let all the heat jump over onto that coolant, then take it out to the radiator. So a flathead Ford, you can get away with it because it runs at a slower RPM, but for the most part, this is what we do. On a race car, Moroso makes a kit. We never had money, so we made our own kit. They have restrictors. So there's a gold one, a red one, a blue one, a different color in a little package. It's the same size as a thermostat, and all it is a disc with a hole in it, and they have different size holes. Like I said, there's a red one, a blue one, a green one. You put them in there, and that's for a race car that you don't want to stat. I don't want to keep my stat closed while I warm the engine up. It's a race car, okay? So water's going to be circulating. It's a race car. If it's a circle track car, we'll wait till it's at wide open throttle, and we'll see what the temperature is. And we'll change that disc out. We never had money. I think I bought one in my life of those Moroso disc kits. You didn't need that. We just took the stat apart. So you got your thermostat. We clip the little top piece off. The spring flies off. The plunger comes off. And you have the stat with the hole in the center of it. Make your own restrictor. So there you go. You need to slow your coolant down to extract the heat. Like I said, but on a flathead, you could get by with it. And that's why people started doing it to other engines. And, they turn at a lot lower RPM.
Okay, Lawnmower remarks that most cars from the mid-70s to the early 80s used to ping on regular unleaded, and a lot pinged on regular leaded.
So, the pinging, all of this, and I say this a lot, all of this has to do Octane and everything is all relevant to one thing. We're all just talking about one thing, and that's it. There's a lot of different things that touch it, and there's different things you could do about it. But what's the main thing we're talking about? Cylinder temperature. That's all that we're dealing with. So cylinder temperature is what we're dealing with. How you choose to work around that, that's up to you. I can throw a lot of dollar bills at it. Nowadays, the dollar ain't gonna do nothing. Throw a lot of 20s at it. I can throw a lot of octane at it. I can buy a lot of high octane fuel. Octane rating is just the BTUs heat, the amount of heat that it takes to react. So for this fuel to react, to combust, to do its thing, it's going to take BTUs, it's going to take heat. Okay, we have a spark plug that gets it going, right? So the higher the octane, more BTUs before it reacts. That's why a high compression engine needs a high octane fuel. If you put high octane fuel on a low compression engine, it'll actually run worse. You'll get less horsepower. There's not a lot of energy in that because it's not exploding. Also, the higher the octane slows down your fuel burn in the combustion chamber. So I slow down the fuel burn. What does that mean? If I change octane by 1 close of a point, my timing better change. You know, especially if you got a hot rod that you're just doing the timing by hand. If you got something that has knock sensors, it's going to self-tune. It's going to remove the timing when it goes into pinging. So if all of this just has to do with BTUs in the combustion chamber, heat in the combustion chamber. I've said it a million times. If I said it once, what is a byproduct of compression? A byproduct. What happens when we compress something? Okay, when we compress something, think of an air compressor. Those that have air compressors, have you touched an air compressor when you walked around it, touched it, burnt your hand, and you're thinking it's just air? Why is my air compressor hot? Why does it make condensation? Why is there water coming out of the bottom of my air compressor? It gets quite hot. When you compress something, you're putting pressure. Think of 4 or 5 guys in a room, and the room gets smaller and smaller and smaller, right? You're putting a lot more pressure on these guys, right? You're going to put a lot more heat. You're going to get them agitated. The same way with the molecules in the combustion chamber, okay? So we're going to start compressing them. The area is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The molecules are moving around, bouncing off the walls like crazy, the walls being the cylinder walls. Those molecules bouncing off the walls are causing friction. I know it sounds like, what are you talking about? Air bouncing off a wall causing friction? Touch an air compressor. Okay? It gets smaller, smaller, smaller. They start moving around super fast. They're getting agitated. They're getting hot because of the friction. Now, the piston didn't go all the way up. And all this agitation, all of this heat ignited the fuel. The spark plug never said, let's go. We want to be in control of timing. If we can control timing, we can make power. If we're not in control, think of anything in your world, in your life, that you're not in control of. Nothing works. Everybody, I don't know, you're not going to have to be a control freak, but you need control. You need. I don't want to get into the non-control. Well, anyway, so you want to control of it. If I can control timing, if I can control when the combustion happens, I can make horsepower. We want max cylinder pressure, 12 to 15 degrees. This is a big one. A lot of people spend a lot of money on dynos to figure this out, and are never going to tell you. So you heard it here first. 12 to 15 degrees after top dead center is when we want max PSI. That's when more bang for the buck. Think of a not a Ferris wheel, but what is it when you go around, the kids are playing around in a circle? I can't think of stuff. But as they're going around in this wheel, not the Ferris wheel, whatever it's called, and as it's going around, and if you keep hitting it, it gets faster and faster. Set your timing to too soon, and you can break your hand. Set the timing to too late, and it's already past you, and it's too late. I'm still hitting it, but I'm not spinning it any faster. I'm just keeping it going. That's your timing is a little too late. It's safe. I'm not going to break a hand. I'm not going to break a connecting rod. I'm not going to break a piston. The piston's already going down. But if I would have caught it sooner, as it went by, my kid would be going faster and faster. So late timing, not going to hurt anything, but I'm not going to give it as much force on the connecting rod and the piston as I need. Early timing, you're going to break your hand, or you're going to bend a rod and a piston. So timing is really important. If timing is really important because of pressure on the piston at a given time, I'm talking 12 to 15 degrees after top dead center, is critical to make this ungodly amount of horsepower that people go like, why did this engine make more than this one over here? It sounds different. Timing is everything. So we want to make sure that we give the timing like 12 to 15 degrees. And as I explained, octane changes the fuel burn. Higher octane slows down the way that the gas burns. So I changed my octane. The tune is gone. So that's when people say, can you tune my engine? I ask, what gas are you going to run? What fuel are you going to run? Because it's all very important. And you could go, well, I tune my engine exactly like Billy Bob. You know me, I'll use Billy Bob. And Billy Bob's is working awesome. I did the same thing, and I'm getting preignition and detonation. Everything is very important. The exact fuel is very important. You go out there and go, you know what, I'm going to go to the track, and I'm going to put some 110 race fuel in it. But you didn't tune anything different? I'm not saying it's not going to work, but you're not getting bang for the buck. So, all right. Is that another too long of one?
Yeah, it's really getting time to wrap up, although there was, Johnny Ringo had a question a little while back that is probably important to address, although I'm not going to let you go on too long.
All right, Johnny Ringo, 20 years ago?
Yes, 20 years ago, as a high school kid, we could walk into a shop and ask to be an apprentice. These days, it's next to impossible because liability. What do you recommend to a kid wanting to be an apprentice?
That's a great question. Nowadays, it's tough. It is really tough because the sophisticated machine shops are using $85,000 hones. That's a diamond hone. Well, if you got a job in there, the most thing you're going to be doing is wiping it down. They're not going to let you hone on that hone because the diamond hone part is $10,000 just a hone, and if you don't have it set right and it goes down and smashes on the webs, you break. It's just grenades that piece. So, I would suggest going to an old school shop. I have a friend of mine has a shop. It's local. He's a young lad, as they say, and he did the right thing. He went to the School of Automotive Machinists and he learned, for the most part, out of 10 people that have gone to that school, I just think is, man, you just weren't. I don't know. I don't understand, but you don't have a clue what's going on because they know how to be machine operators. They don't know. Now, I'm not saying the school is bad. I'm saying these kids that just come in here, I want a job, and the first thing they do is tell you how much they need because of their student loans. This young man went, as opposed to being in his dorm and out partying like all the other kids. The school is open 24 hours a day. They have an upstairs, downstairs. This is what we've told me. Instructors, there's always somebody there. On your own time, you can always come back in, and they have flow benches. They got dynos. They got every kind of machine that's there's there. So he's working on the cylinder head program. Well, at night he's going back in there, and instructors in there, and so he spent every moment that he was there in the lab. He said, all my buddies in my class, they're playing the PS3 or whatever. They're playing video games. They're partying. They just think mom and dad just paid for me to come to this class, and every chance they get, they're at every bar and every party and everything else. Well, when they come out, they don't know much about anything. This particular young individual took the classes that he went for and then was always on the floor, learning, just whatever he could absorb. Then he comes in to get a job, even applied here, but the place where he ended up getting this job, and it's a long story because it was before applying here. No, we don't have an opening. No, we don't do this. In fact, it's a secretive. It's a porting shop, and a lot of the porting they do for Ford, they do for a lot of different race programs, Porsche, and there's a secretive area of the shop that no one goes into, okay? So he says, I will sweep floors. I will take out the trash. I will do whatever, okay? So he gets in. They said, okay, we can't pay you, but minimum wage. After the student loans, all this, it was almost 2 years of literally being the cleanup guy. And yes, you could think, I went to school to learn how to do these things, and I am not going to do this. It was the environment he wanted to be in. He eventually, the head department, one of the masters started getting ill, had to do some doctor stuff, so asked other partners, can I bring him in and we'll just show him some entry level porting and some entry level machine work, not any of our secret proprietary stuff. I need the help. That way I can go to the doctor. Long story short, that's how he got in there. Then he started working a seat and guide machine. And then they realized, like, hey, he's seen a seat and guide machine before. They were able to turn the way they do things. Then it became the porting, blah, blah, blah. Right now, he owns his own state-of-the-art shop. So you got to want it. That's my answer is you got to want it. Old school, if you can find an old school shop. But you can go in there. You got to get rid of the earbud, get rid of the phone, leave your phone in your car. If you're going to be somewhere, be there. I don't care if they say sweep, be there sweeping. I was sweeping, I was mopping this morning and cleaning because, so I got to do it on my own shop. But I find behind the mill a brand new carbide.
Yeah.
That somebody opened up the package, bing, bing, it fell. Oh, it fell behind the mill. I don't want to move those crankshafts and get to it. I'll grab another one. That's the thing.
Okay,
open your eyes
and
wants
you to know that he appreciates the response, but he wants to know what machine school is this. He's a junior in high school right now, so he's got a couple of years.
Okay, it's a Sam School of Automotive Machinist. Like I said, this particular individual, he got out of it like tons, but he wasn't arrogant and he knew I got to get started and get some experience. All the other ones that have come in from that school, like I said, I pointed at some Chevy small block. I said, oh, you know what? Let's start you off in the head department. I pointed at some small block Chevy heads and they look like he's never seen a Chevy 350 head. So I pointed at some, he goes, are all those heads need to be done? I go, yeah. And I got a Honda head right there. I got a set of, V6s right there, a bunch of overhead cam stuff. Well, that's cool. They do. I said, what you never seen these things? They go, oh, I seen that head. LS head. So he knew the LS head. What's the LS head? Because that's what they're teaching them on. So I said, well, let's go over. Maybe you can do connector rods or block or boring and honing. And every time he's like, well, that's a weird machine. Well, I said, let me, and we started out with this. And after a while, it was just like, let me guess. The machine you used was white. I said, okay, I have a sun and rod machine. Okay, mine is green. Before they were red. And then they went to green. Just recently they went to white. It's a sun and rod machine, dude. Well, it was, and every time I said, let me guess. Your home was white, right? Right. You had the newest diamond hone. Okay, I don't have the newest diamond hone. You know how to read a mic? He couldn't read a micrometer. So start off right now. If this is really what you want to do, buy yourself a set of micrometers. Start off with you
don't have to buy the Mitutoyo. Just an inexpensive micrometer.
An inexpensive, but I would rather advise, if you have to buy a brand new set of some off-brand, you're gonna hear it. Where I buy a lot of my tools, I just finished buying a cutter for my mill, carbide cutter. It was gonna be $250, brand new on eBay, surplus cutter. It's a carbide bit. I could have bought one from Rec Supply and spent close to it. I could have saved a little bit, but it wouldn't have been a carbide. So. Me, I would, and I love old micrometers in wooden boxes. I love the smell of the old wooden boxes. I got some, they have a Spud is his name, and it was a customer of ours that his dad passed away. He was a machinist, and he says, man, we have no idea. They're going to throw these away. Whatever, could you use these? And I ended up buying all of his machining mics. All his mics, his 1, 2, 3 blocks, they all got Spud written all over them. The certified, he was an aircraft machinist. So I would rather buy a little bit better a mic on eBay than a cheap plastic mic or whatever. But start off with the 0 to 1 mic. You got to learn how to read a micrometer. You're going to have to learn how to read a micrometer.
We're way over time.
Okay, we're over time.
Big Waffle Louie.
Yes,
does want to know, and I'm going to cut you off because we're not going to stay long, but Big Waffle Louie wants to know how much, if any, is the gain from throttle body or intake spacers, and do the helical designs actually have positive effect on air intake?
Real quick, yes, and yes. And especially like the throttle body on the two barrel, the throttle body on the GMs, They love a spacer. Think about what NASCAR did when they choked them down to the Venturi size. Remember, they're trying to slow the cars down. So they actually went in there and they redesigned stuff. They put actually long tube spacers in there, raising the air up. Raising it starts to get the air flowing straight. Spacers always good. If you got room for a hood clearance spacers. If you're going to put a spacer, put a phenolic spacer. So let that even be an insulator to keep the heat off the throttle body. But awesome spacers. Yes, yes, and yes. And I think maybe next Friday, maybe we'll just stick on the subject of how do you get into this field. I don't know where this young lad is from. If you were in Texas or San Antonio, I'd say come on. But I don't know where you're at.
Well, Big Waffle Louie wants to thank you for answering. John says he loves watching these lives. I say peace and assembly grease, folks, because it's Friday and we have stuff to do.
I have to do it now. That's what that's how we end.
We sign off.
Yeah, so
I gotta do peace and assembly grease because of Brian.
Because of Brian, yep.
And actually, Danny was on live earlier with Humble Mechanic, who also recognized our use of peace and assembly grease.
So that's how we leave our Fridays. We'll see you next Friday. Man, make sure hit Shop Mama up, hit me up, of what subject you want to talk about before, because if not, me, I'll just go on.
Just ramble.
I'll just ramble.
He'll just ramble.
But peace and assembly grease. Enjoy your Friday.
Terry,
enjoy your family.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, Terry. Kiss RC.
Those folks overseas who stay up to participate, we really appreciate.
It's late there, so all right. So peace and assembly grease from Texas.
Happy Friday, folks.
Happy Friday.
Fiesta.
We'll see you next Friday. Yay!